Did you ever finish a session and you say to yourself, oh my God, that was the best campfire storytelling session I've ever had? That's Daggerheart. And by now you might be a little curious about running this game. And you might be a little bit intimidated, but stick with me for a few minutes because I'm going to show you why it is absolutely worth your seat at that table. Hi, I'm Todd from Wither & Bloom Studios, and I've been GMing story-forward tabletop role-playing games for decades. Daggerheart has quickly become my favorite system for creating those, oh my God, did that just happen? Those moments are fantastic, and they happen a lot in Daggerheart. Now, this series is not going to be a rule dump or a lecture series on how to run this game. This game is more about feel. And so I want to try and instill in you a confidence to let you know that you can run this game even if you haven't cracked open that rule book yet. And by the end of this series, you're going to know if Daggerheart is right for your table. All right, so let's say the quiet part out loud right now. Daggerheart looks different, and that can be intimidating. We have all kinds of new stuff. We've got hope and fear. We've got a 2d12 dice system. We've got things that I use as a GM to prep that are based around notions of bonds and truths. These are all things that can seem intimidating. Now, if your brain is going, new system, new prep, new everything, that's totally fair. But you should know that new doesn't have to equal hard. And here's the relief. You don't have to memorize everything to run a beautiful session one. All you have to do is get into the right mindset. And from there, we've got this. Daggerheart is built to make player choices matter. It turns failure into story fuel. And it turns rolls of the dice into these nudges that push the story towards tension or triumph. In combat, it can be big and cinematic without wrestling with some grid. And as for world building, you're now preparing in broader strokes, and you intend to let your players fill in those gaps. So here's an example of how this went once in one of my games. We had a player that was making this desperate attempt to climb a ladder to ring a warning bell. And they made a roll, and the roll failed. Now, in a typical TTRPG, probably the one we all know, that failure would have resulted in, you fail, roll for damage. And that's probably where it would have ended. But in Daggerheart, we were able to flavor that failure a little bit, because while the failure was close to making the difficulty for that roll and didn't quite make it, that person, fell, but managed to ring the bell just before they fell. And now that bell attracts the wrong person, not the one they were trying to attract. So by attracting the wrong person, the mood at the table and the tone of the story totally change. Now all of a sudden, everything's different. Not a total failure, and not ending in some bland result like roll for damage. This is the Daggerheart engine at work. Okay, so let's talk about what Daggerheart gives you, the GM. So number one, less overprep and more discovery. First of all, you're prepping themes and situations, and you're allowing your players to fill that in. No more long sessions of storybook lore that have to be written out as if you pre-wrote the story. Two, built-in engagement. So the hope and fear system and some of my notions of bonds and truths, which I'll talk about in a minute, they sort of command an engagement from the players. They sort of force the players to stay with you and stay with the story. Three, tension without gotcha moments. You have a curious player at the table, you don't have to punish them for being curious. You can just tune the dial a little bit towards something that's more intense. Now, what does Daggerheart bring to you, the player? Number one, you are co-authors of this story, not mere passengers along for a ride. You shape the setting. You build this story. Two, failure now becomes more interesting. A failure opens an even cooler door. So don't be afraid to fail. See what happens. And three, the emotional arcs are fantastic. The hope and fear system now all of a sudden make triumphs that much more rewarding. So if your table loves story beats, good character arcs and growth and high trust play, Daggerheart's going to shine at your table. All right, so what are some of the pushback things I hear from people when I'm talking about Daggerheart? And we've heard them before. So number one, we like tactics and strategy. Daggerheart takes that away from us. No, it doesn't. Daggerheart actually rewards tactics and strategy. The difference is it's not going to bog you down with tons of heavy mechanics. Two, well, what about the learning curve? It's a whole new system. You're going to learn the entire loop of activity in this game in one session. You will have it and you'll have a good grasp on it. Learning curve's not steep at all. Three, what if my players are shy? Daggerheart scaffolds collaboration and rewards players that tend to be shy. In a lot of cases, you might actually hear from them more by playing Daggerheart. All right, in our next episode, we are going to crack open the beating heart of this game. We are going to deal with issues of fear and hope, the bonds and truths that I use as a GM to prep my game. And this is not going to be some long, jargon-heavy discussion. It's going to be light, and it's going to get you there. I will show you how these ideas quietly run the drama behind the scenes. And we're going to start with one very simple move that you can use in your first session to feel out how this game comes to life. Now, across this series, we're going to talk about several things. One, welcoming players in your session zero without a lecture. We're going to make session zero fun. I've got some tips and tricks for that are going to open up your session zero to be something totally new. Two, we're going to learn how to dial hope and fear like the soundtrack to a movie. You all know that when tension rises in a TTRPG, the first thing you're probably going to do is shift the music, depending on what you're using. We go into combat, we raise that music's intensity. This is how we're going to use hope and fear. I'm going to show you how to get there. Three, we're going to talk about running combat that is fast and vivid, how to keep it moving, how to keep the rhythm going in combat, because combat is fast, not slowed down. Four, world building in broad strokes so you can build these scenarios with confidence. And finally, building your own voice as a Daggerheart GM, because that's where it's at, and you have your own voice to bring to this table. I'm hoping to flesh that out. Now, every one of these episodes is short, it is focused, and it's designed so that you can bring at least one thing to your table that week. So this is a good reason to stick with this. All right, so if you've ever thought, can I run this? I'm telling you that you absolutely can. So I'm curious, drop a comment down below. What excites you about this game and what scares you? Like what's holding you back? I want to see those comments, and I'm actually going to take some of those and use them for a Q&A session. I will talk about them in some of the episodes that I'm going to be producing. Tell me what's going on. All right, so lastly, hit subscribe so you don't miss episode 2, the beating heart of Daggerheart. And if this seems to have helped you or you like what you saw, share it with your GM. Maybe you're a player who has no intention of running this game, but you want to see it brought to your game. Share it with them. All right, I'm going to go, but I will see you in episode 2. Looking forward to it. Take care.